to my podcast. My name is Dale McCluskey, and I want to welcome you. And here in this podcast, here I have Christian Hershman on. I wanted to bring him on for to get his perspective as to what's going on in the dog training world, as well as a little bit more about Christian. Christian, he certified as a dog trainer through this system of training. So he attended the last course I had on. He went through it and very successfully, and so he has great insight. Welcome, Christian.
Thanks, Dale. Always great to hook up with you, talk
Oh,
dogs.
absolutely, great having you on. So I guess Christian, I had Jack Morton on my last guest there, but again, I want to have you on here, and it's great having you on. And I just want to get, I guess, for people to get to know a little bit more about you. You're out there on the social media side of things, which we'll talk about after.
Sure.
But you're starting to kind of, I guess, with Hildegard. That's I call the 1 percentile dog. I talk about that. With the ability to be able to achieve a certain result. But maybe Christian, maybe just tell the audience a little bit more to get to know you, kind of your backstory, maybe a little bit if you want, and kind of go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a background in hospitality, right? So I've been a restaurateur and really started my career as a cook, working towards achieving, more, a bigger career, getting into chefing and kind of the creative side of food and drink. So I was lucky enough to launch many different projects in Sarasota, Florida, which is where I live. I actually live in Bradenton, so a little south of Tampa. The hospitality business, a hard business. I had an opportunity to sell my business after the pandemic. So I went ahead and did that. And then I'm kind of looking around for what I want to do. And nothing really interests me enough to kind of change careers other than my interest in dogs, right? So I had lots of dogs in the past and larger dogs, powerful dogs, Doberman and American Bulldog and Lab Pit Bull mix. So hunting dogs, I like to hunt and do that kind of recreational kind of stuff. So I built a good relationship with my dogs, and I had thought, and I had a certain, rapport with my dogs, but I knew that it wasn't quite right. It wasn't coming together exactly right. So I took a chance, an opportunity when I had the time to start to, like you would say, to seek out truth, right? So to really dive deep on the topic and really just spend many hours a day for the last couple years, researching the topic of dogs and looking for a better understanding of what's going on with dogs and humans. And I've had a great time doing this kind of research. And so that's, strengthened my opinions and my willingness to go out and kind of discuss or debate these topics on social media.
So I guess the question is the starting point for you. I mean, I think you mentioned this before about starting off like basically with like Zach George or people that you see out there. And I guess the question is like, I guess, because I've seen that before where, this idea about what training is, it's this popular idea that training is a certain way. But I guess, you kind of started, from the bottom. It's called the bottom, but yeah.
Right. I think the first conversation I had with you in person, I had mentioned to you, because you have a robust body of work on YouTube. So certainly came across Dale McCluskey. But there's so many others. And like you've mentioned, they have huge followings, which doesn't mean much. To me, I'm seeking the information, but I did kind of follow that path, right? So I had always had powerful breed dogs, so I always kind of understood this kind of dominance kind of thing going on, right? But I understood it incorrectly, right? More of like this kind of dominance thing that us humans do, where we puff up our chest and we kind of pose, and there's a different thing going on with humans and this idea of being dominant, right, or aggressive, right? So I was approaching my dominance incorrectly. I know that now, but nevertheless, I kind of knew that like you have to be kind of in charge, right? In the past, I kind of instinctually knew that and had results with my dogs, hunting dogs. You know, you got to be able to kind of get them to come back to you and kind of drop stuff and like kind of have some control. So I kind of understood that there's something going on there, but because of some of the shortcomings in the past, I thought, let me look at some other alternative kind of ideas, right? So I fell into Zach George because he's got a huge following, right? And so I started implementing some of these ideas when Hildegard was very young, like 1 year old or 8 or 9 months old, and started with these ideas, starting with like, don't touch the dog, don't correct the dog. And this kind of, you know, hokey kind of like, I don't know how to even explain it. Almost like you're just kind of floating around with the dog and everyone's just kind of hanging out. And then when the dog does something wrong, you're supposed to just kind of gently encourage it to change its behavior or reaction to whatever. So, and then, you know, as the dog got older, nothing was improving. And even beyond that, I wasn't connecting with the dog like I have with my other dogs. A lot of it was the dog's desire to be to you know, jump on you, get petting, like force attention, right? Which that was unique. I hadn't had a dog like that. Hildegard really trying to push you to, you know, force attention. You know, now I learned that kind of attention is also kind of on a spectrum, right? So on one side of the spectrum, you have what we would call love and affection and wanting petting. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have aggression, right? And so Hildegard was showing me her preferred, you know, method of control was affection and wanting to get petted and demanding that. But as she got older, it started moving along the spectrum. Now we're starting to get kind of more pushy. Now we're starting to really, you know, really push it more, right? Thus the 1%er, you know, her drive, you know, she's going to keep pushing, right? So reactive to dogs, not so much people, but also people. Like you could tell that was just a matter of time with her. So really just seeking answers led me kind of down the wrong path, because the internet's tricky. I mean, it's there's so much information out there, and the way things are packaged can really draw you in. And before I understood the topic that I was studying, I wasn't picking up on all the editing of the videos, what they're not showing. You know, after spending a lot of time with you now, it's like clear as day. I mean, it's like I don't know how you can't see that, but nevertheless, I did go down kind of a misguided path. Some of these ideas didn't work out for me, and I think they work. I think they can work out for people because, you know, if there's a 1% dog, then that would imply that a large percentage, maybe even 99% of the dogs, will fall into a kind of a follower role without having to really push the dog and influence the dog. So I think a lot of people can fall into following Zach George and others because their dog needs some influence, but not at a level that, you know, they're kind of getting away with it, right? And coping and managing some of the behaviors.
Well, I guess that kind of goes into this. Yeah, kind of gets into this thing too, because I that's why I put out there is like, how are the trainers even assessing what level of change is happening?
Right.
You know, based on at a response level. So, you know, the question I put out there is like, okay, well, how do you even define success? How these trainers define success? Because if it's not a intentional method that is going to make sure you come out on the other side with a predictable outcome, you know, what is the standard? You know what I'm saying? That's the thing I kind of get into. But interested to say that. So, you know, for you, so was there like a really kind of a pivotal moment for you, Christian, that really in your journey that was like, okay, this is not lining up here, or, you know?
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, it's a young dog, so even if you think about it in a literal sense, like if the dog's one, like you've spent like 12 months with the dog. I mean, you really, the relationship, you know, takes time to kind of build it, and it's more important maybe with these 1% dogs because they're going to need a little more guidance, right? Like you would say they're, you know, they have a higher social need, and I think that's a perfect way to phrase it, because it really is. They really need that guidance, that authoritative parenting kind of guidance, you know. So because I wasn't providing that, but I was providing plenty of emotional connection, no guidance, right? Because guidance was punishment, the way I was perceiving it through these other ideas. So really no guidance, right? Total free will on a young dog that has a high drive. She had also had opportunities as a little pup to, chase possums and, do things that in hindsight, I should have never allowed that. Not that I was encouraging it, but, the dog flushes stuff. She gets into stuff. That's her nature. So she had self-rewarded and kind of, got attached herself to, I'm liking this chasing stuff. These, so not only was I not being an authoritative parent, not providing any leadership or guidance, but in addition to that, I was allowing her to have access to things that are lining up, more for her to, gain more control, really filling her up, man. Parking her at the all-you-can-eat buffet. Here you go. It's like, so, but like you say, with these dogs, these high drive dogs, these more rare dogs, there's no get out of jail, right? They're not going to give you a mulligan, right? There's no mulligans. There's no like makeup days. Like you're in the moment with this dog, and you're influencing the dog correctly, or the dog's going to take advantage of your weakness. And people get kind of triggered on that whole concept of strength and weakness.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're necessarily feeble and incapable and weak and decrepit. It just means that in terms of nature, you're on the wrong side of that construct. The yin and yang of it. You're not the strong, you're therefore the weak. I mean, so, but thankfully I met you and things started lining up for Hildegard. And we still work all the time on Hildegard and I's relationship because, again, with these dogs, like, you can start, what I've noticed is you can start to kind of move along and things are really rolling good, but they're always, it's nature. They're always kind of trying to push a little bit more, right?
And there's this reversal thing too. I talked about with Ruben. I mean, he was like a super high drive dog, my first police dog. But the advantage of being able to pour in thousands of hours because it's my job, but not just that, getting them at three months of age, and having that advantage. And so situations with yourself and then with Jack Morton and other people I've helped, it's different with Captain and Lester. It's different because then it's like you're starting from a deficit situation where you're now you have to reverse on a 1 percentile dog, and that's a hard, that can be a really challenging, hard thing. Even though the system of training, it can be done, but it's definitely a process for sure.
It's a lot of reps is what I noticed, because early on I'd reach out to you and be like, man, I mean, we're kind of making improvements, but why is it taking so long? But I think that's a plus for the method, because the system is being reasonable, and I think that's important. You're dealing with these dogs, you don't want them to get stuck. So you have the wrong perception when they're a pup, where you're putting too much emotion, not enough leadership. Then then the perception turns into you're authoritarian. You're like over the top with the dog. So we're going from sappy with the dog to over the top with the dog. I mean, you can see where people get in trouble. Right?
Well, they do, because it's like the alignment of the right parenting style. Talk about the authoritative versus authoritarian. Authoritarian is over the top. It's not going to line up anyway, because there's going to be gaps and holes there, because influence and control aren't going to be reconciled. But you're right. It's got to generate what it needs to generate. But it is about changing people. I mean, people are the key here. So the dog's going to change for the person. So the focus really shifts away from the dog into the person. I understand that's a tall order. That can be a really tall order. Because generally when I'm helping the average dog owner, it's not at a level like, dealing with a 1 percentile dog and getting that level of insight. But what I'm doing is at least giving them bringing those core ingredients in a way that's going to be able to generate enough, for them,
That's right.
versus like with yourself, it's kind of a different thing going on here in a way, because even with yourself or someone like Jack Morton, because it's like, you're dealing with and totally committed too. I mean, when you came on board, you're like, it started off with a board and train with Hildegard to get things sorted out to a certain level. But then you're like,
Yep.
hey, I'm all in here. I want to do the actual course, which was
Absolutely.
great. And then that's just part of the journey too. So,
Right. And it takes time. I think that's, back to the internet. That's kind of why your system doesn't track on the internet as well, because it's actually real. I mean, it's like real life. It's like things are boring and monotonous and not exciting, right? That's real life. I mean, it's not a show, right? And that's kind of the point. So it's harder for people to kind of want to really dive in, because the water's cold, not warm. It's like it's hard,
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
hard.
Oh, absolutely. I guess talk about your journey again. Another thing I found was interesting. I know, like during the course, you mentioned about your background being a professional chef. Like you're like, talking about, here's a guy that's actually run restaurants, and so you're at the kind of, I call kind of like the elite part of food. How does that kind of fit into the dog part of it, or how do you see that? I know in terms of, say, dogs.
Well, I see it as, and in some ways, the same way I approach food is that, first of all, it's a serious topic, right? Like I take it seriously. Like food is for pleasure and fun, but actually it's to nourish us. Actually, it has a real function, a biological function that's very serious and very real. So not that I'm not having fun with food, but I take it seriously. So I'm thoughtful about how I approach food. And it's the same method with the dogs. Like I'm thoughtful about like what's really going on. How deep is this connection, this relationship? First it was with food, now it's with dogs, trying to flesh out some depth here, right? The restaurants help also in the sense that, I'm in a leadership role like the chef, so like it's natural for me to take on that role where others, whether they're human or in this case the dog, whether I'm trying to be a role model, trying to guide, some of these characteristics, I feel like, I've had the benefit of being in a position where that kind of makes sense to me, that you would want to be the kind of lead the dog, right? So, and then just that it's very challenging, and restaurants are challenging. I mean, talk about relationships. You have relationships with your workers, you have relationships with your customers. I mean, it's really all about relationship. And then on top of that, it's very real and very hard, right? But then everyone views it as, oh, it's entertaining and attractive, and restaurants and wine and food and drink and great decor and all this stuff. So there's a very superficial nature to it. Like here's this restaurant, here's the stage, it's all set, and there's theatrics going on. But then behind the curtain, there's actually something very serious and very challenging going on. So that kind of lines up for me with this dog thing, because once you look at the internet, it's all superficial, it's all fake, it's all marketing. But there actually is truth and something real going on behind the curtain, for real.
Well, I guess that's where I put out a video here saying, I'm trying to kind of help people understand that, like, that's not a world I live in, like that fake world. Because for me, from the beginning, it was about being real. It was about asking the questions that need to be asked about, okay, what is the relationship side of things with dogs? And so as I move forward with, say, Ruben, I got the level say, okay, there's something really deep going on here. There's something that goes beyond just devices and goes beyond just this thing with treats. And so, when people ask me how the system came about, it kind of came about naturally in a lot of ways, because I didn't actually, even though I started off, and people don't understand, like when I started off with my trainer, great guy, Bill Grimmer, I started off with that learning-based thing. I did use treats for tracking at a certain point, but kind of like blowing beyond that, blowing beyond it in a way which we're saying, like, okay, just naturally going faster with Ruben. And so there's that dynamic there where you get to a certain level, you say, okay, there's something very profound here with dogs. There's something deeper than just surface, than just appearances. Like you said, there's something it's beyond just superficial stuff going on here. Like, what is it? And that's really, because with me, I start with that underdog mentality anyway, with the police canine part. But then there's a point where I reach, we're saying, there's something else going on here. I'm going to figure this out. I don't care how long it takes me, but I'm going to audit. I'm going to self-audit here to a level where I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to say there's something. And then when you go into the dog training world side of things, because I went from the blue line, so to speak, the police canine, to helping just the average dog owner out. And people were coming to me, like a lot of people that were going through, cycling through balanced and forest free and all that stuff. And so I was like saying, well, there's something not right here. Why is this not lining up for so many people? And so that's where you get into the fine details. And to me, that's what really matters is because people could say, well, I have a system, just trust what I'm saying, or trust the system. But I'm not like that. I'm saying I don't trust what's going on in the dog training world. I want to know. Like I actually want to get into the fine details here to say, because I've said this before, if even one dog takes the hit, if we have true empathy for dogs, that's too many. And that's the thing why I say the dog training world is so fake and phony, because with all these trainers out there, they're talking a good show on social media, but I understand the reality of what's really happening based on what they're marketing. I understand what the position that puts dogs and owners in. And so, so it should come down to, okay, if there's a problem here, we need to fix this. We need to figure this out. But see, the problem is that this has gotten so out of control. And so when I go into that dog training world now, I don't stay there long. And that's why sometimes when I'm doing my Flipping the Script series and people wonder why is it that I've taken that down at times, because honestly, I get to the point where I don't want to deal with it anymore. Like I'm just like, because I've always, Christian, my whole thing from the beginning, but going back to 2007, was always to help dogs and owners the right way, period. I already knew what I was up against once I started getting that awareness. And so I'm like, I don't care. These people can say whatever they want on social media. They don't know who I am. They're filtering. They're trying to define who I am through a filter that is totally sideways. Like they're already sold out to this ideology. And so all these individuals that are making all these comments going off, and I guess that's the question. So and this is kind of funny in a way, because you've gone through everything. You've got really good insight. You've gone through the course, you've gone through everything. And so there was a moment for me, I kind of chuckled, because you were actually on Robert Hines's social media talking. And I don't think he had a clue yet that you were really affiliated with me until a certain point where I saw a comment where he said, this guy sounds like Dale. You know what I'm saying? It's like that mini me moment almost, was like saying, because it's true, right? It's like saying, well, you aren't going to be with me for a certain period of time and not get it, right? It was kind of comical.
So true. And I like to enter those guys through social media platform, mostly YouTube, and I like to discuss with them. But I hope I'm coming from a respectful place, because I actually want to have dialogue. I want to talk about it.
I think you. Oh, I think you are, because I've read some of your comments. And this is me being real here. I'm thinking, Christian's way too nice to some of these guys. I'm like, I've been at this for so many years. I'm like, because these guys are not going to listen anyway, right?
I'll get more.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it's true. That's why sometimes I pull back, because honestly, my nature is that, because you get fed up over a while, where it's like, because here's the thing, at times I've pulled down my stuff, and this is where I'm coming from. I pull down my stuff, right? But it doesn't stop anyway. You know what I'm saying? I still have these people filter in. So I'm like, listen, Dale, you might just put it all out there. And, because really my stuff, you get to a level here, Christian, where it's like, this isn't really for them anyway, in a way. A lot of these, I hate to say it, but a lot of these people aren't going to change, because they're not incentivized. They've already crossed those lines. I hate to say it, but a lot of these people, a lot of these trainers aren't going to walk this back. So my thing is, I'm going to put the information out for, say, it could be new trainers like yourself. It can be, but for the public. Because the public, if they find Dale McCluskey on social media, it's probably going to be a miracle anyway, because the majority of trainers out there are marketing this ideology.
Well, so there's not a doubt in my mind that there's a reason that you don't pick up as many subscribers, and I think it has more to do with the algorithms of YouTube and the popularity. Your narrative does not fit with the algorithm. It's
no, so and I had a guy say this. A guy who knows me, he said, Dale, because he's out there a little bit himself, but he said, Dale, you don't realize how hard this, like, people, this isn't a great message. because we gotten to that level now, like, because it's become really hard truth, because, it's like people are just have this culture has been great, because you're really fighting against the tide in a lot of ways, because these trainers have the home field advantage in a way, because they're playing off people's emotions.
Well, and the internet thrives off fake
yeah,
virtues. I mean,
yeah,
the
oh,
internet,
absolutely.
literally, its main fuel is fake virtue. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's the exact opposite of what your channel is. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like a lot of people don't know this. I had a guy, one of the guys there, Jonas Black. I mean, he's all over TikTok and everything, but he actually sent me a social media post on saying, hey, I'm in Florida. He was visiting some wildlife thing down here. He said, hey, Dale, I want to meet with you. And I'm like, hey, great. Because here's the thing, and I didn't take it as a threat or anything, because I posted some stuff about, just like I do my Flip from the Script series. So he wanted to meet up with me and have a conversation. And I'm like, hey, absolutely, I'll have a conversation. Because here's the point, is on social media, I don't say anything on there that I wouldn't say right in front of somebody. You know what I'm saying? I'm not even saying that in not even a bad way, right? I'm like, hey, I'll sit down and we'll have a talk. I'm the same person I am in person as I am on social media. A lot of these people are not like that. You know what I'm saying? They're as fake and phony. Yeah. What's
they're
that?
Playing a role.
Yeah, they're playing a role. Exactly. Yeah, they're playing a role. So that's why, when I go into social media, I almost can't even take it sometimes, because it's like saying this is so fake and phony to me, because they're not being honest with themselves. They're not being honest with the people that they're putting this message out to. Because all these people are blame shifting on dogs, because that's the reality. Like, I know the real deal here with what's going on. So these trainers can say all day long and talk a big show, but they're as fake and phony as Zach George on a good day. I mean, it's a joke.
Absolutely.
It's a joke.
But I go back to the restaurant analogy. If they were to just take a camera and follow around the back of the house of a restaurant and what's going on in the restaurant, nobody would watch it. It would be nobody wants to know the truth, and they want to see the little action points.
That's right.
Flame off the grill and the pretty girl sitting down and the nice lighting and stuff. They don't, so it's just it doesn't it doesn't make for good entertaining content, and because it's real.
You're absolutely right, Christian. I think that's the thing about everything. Society's gotten so superficial and so much about themselves and narcissistic and self-focused that people aren't willing to even be honest about it. It's like, and so this whole thing with how this plays into that, and so it's like, so when someone like me steps forward, because what I'm showing is I'm saying a lot of stuff doesn't even make sense. How could these trainers call themselves experts on both sides when they're pretending to be different? Like, there's so many red flags I talk to and say there's so many contradictions that if you just take the contradictions and start adding them up, I mean, if you're the least bit objective, you should be able to come to at least a somewhat of a conclusion that the dog training world is messed up for a reason. Like, this stuff is it's all connected. So when I've gone through my Flipping the Script series, I'm showing them, saying, hey, all these controversies, which aren't stopping, by the way, all these controversies, they're all pointing directly towards what I'm saying in terms of what people are marketing as a process. Like, it's bringing people into divisions, bringing people into chaos, into confusion. But none of these trainers are using these situations as an opportunity, which they should be, to step back and ask some serious questions, which they should have asked at the beginning, as individuals. Instead they've just taken a hold of this, and run with it. And so the dog training world's screwed up for a reason. But the good news is, at least, people like yourself are getting it, because I know I can't do this by myself. I mean, if this is going to turn around, people have to get out there that have really the right information and starting to advocate, say, hey, this is it. So going back to your food. So, going back to the food part. So how do you see, I guess you talk about food and your journey, I guess, how do you see all that kind of merging together, or looking for the right word?
And that's right, kind of in parallel with working with Hildegard and, implementing the method and changing the way I think. In parallel with that, I've also been working on, a business model, right, that involves dogs, right? So, it kind of made sense to me to kind of build off of my background, which is in the kitchen. So,
absolutely.
I've studied a lot on the dog, dog diet, the optimal dog diet, right? Or, basically what we should feed our dogs, right? So I won't go too much into all that. There's so much information on how to feed your dogs, but, I think hopefully everyone does recognize that dogs are carnivores, and they're omnivores in the sense that they'll scavenge, right, and eat carbohydrate, but really to thrive, they eat meat and the associated fat, right? So, basically, learning more about the dog, I've worked on a concept that allows me to kind of not do training. I think of it more as relationship work, right? So the idea is similar to a private chef. We'll have a website and the ability to buy food, high quality food. But really what I'm after, like a private chef, is going into the home, and maybe we prepare a month's worth of food and vacuum pack it and get all organized. But it gives me a chance to work with the handler, the owner, and start to maybe take, often there's too much emotion, right? Put on these dogs, right? So to try to maybe work on this concept of taking some of that emotion that comes from a good place, taking that emotion and then refocusing it into this food. So emotion turns into nourishing, right? Which is also coming from a place of love, right? But maybe it lines up better for the dog. Less emotion, more nourishment, right? So we're caring for the dog in a more in a way that's more follows a more of a leadership role, right? We're providing.
And that's why I've said, like, your concept's great. Like, I've always talked about this issue about connection, and don't get me wrong, we wouldn't get dogs unless we want them in our lives to care and to, having that level of caring, and if that's a good thing. But, however, we get this thing just like being a parent, our role is really important in the sense of that, what that connection represents. Because even when I'm talking about, people petting their dogs, I get in this thing about, well, think a little deeper about that, because, it's not just that there's depth in that connection itself. And so, think about taking stress off your dog, how to align the roles properly. But there's, because really how I see this stuff too in the dog training world, Christian, even with a lot of these trainers, is I see them like really losing out, that they're missing the opportunity to go deeper. And so to me, it's like, in a way, it's kind of sad, because there's so much more in that relationship that people are not experiencing, or not able, that bond and the depth of that connection. So, people will just look at my videos and they take away, they filter, they're looking through a certain lens and they get upset. But I'm like encouraging people, like, think a little deeper here, because if you want a better relationship, we have to be able to understand what that means to the dog. And so for you, that's why I found it really interesting. When you're sitting here and you're doing the course, I was asking you, like, how do you see, this kind of merging? To me, it was very interesting to hear your thoughts about your merging, like the chef side of things, because it was like, to me, it was just like, wow, that's like really interesting, because it's like taking my system and being able to kind of bring it to what about the food side.
Right. And wanting to see, I think the system is so valid, but the way that it's packaged doesn't fit with our current culture, right? This permissive thing we talk about, which is true. I mean, good or bad, it is what it is. It just allows, the food kind of allows to do a presentation that maybe feels better, right? And that might help people kind of get to where they need to be in a more realistic sense, the way they view their dog, right? So starting to kind of just work off that a little bit, and get people to think about, nurturing versus emotion, right? Like, they're both affection, right? But one is coming from a different place than the other. One, emotion is often for ourselves. It's satisfying something we need to fix in ourselves. It has nothing to do with the dog. In fact, with my dog, now that our relationship's lined up, like, she don't even want me to pet her. I mean, she'll let me pet her, and I can pet her and whatever, but not it. Isn't that interesting that when she's not in control, she doesn't care if anyone pets her. But if she's in control, everyone needs to pet her. Interesting. Right? So it's, again, it's back to nature. Like, do packs of dogs run around and give each other treats to get them to do what they want? Does the mom dog walk up with food every time to to bribe the younger dog to follow her? No. So it just makes absolutely no sense. But does the mom provide? Do they nurture those pups? Well, of course. So it just, to me, it was just trying to help people get out of the rut, the emotional rut, because you're right. And I know this from experience with Hildegard. Once you break that kind of thing that's built, that's incorrect in terms of the natural alignment, this over emotional connection, once you break that, it's amazing what you have with your dog. It's incredible. And it is sad that these trainers, some of them might be experiencing it because they don't have personal high drive dogs. So they're able to build a bond a lot easier. So they're taking it for granted.
Well, because they don't have to go there. I mean,
right.
Like I talk about the 1 percentile dogs in the sense that, apologize for some lawnmower out there, some background noise here, but the 1 percentile dog, that dog is going to give you the insight. So it's like a blessing in disguise, even though it's like kind of a nightmare. It's a nightmare at the beginning. I understand that, but if you see the value in, and you see you come out on the other side of it, and then you're able to kind of like see through everything. Which kind of reminds me, when you hear on that course for the dog trainer course, there was a moment, I can't remember the exact question, but you asked me a question that really, you could tell that you had thought about, you'd been thinking about something deep, really at a deep level, and it caused me to chuckle. I was like, this guy is like, is like on his toes here, which is good, right? And it reminded me when I was in Canada there, I used to go into the schools, and I went into the elementary schools with Ruben and doing like drug awareness, but then the kids get to pet on the dog, and then but they get to ask some questions. I remember this one kid, it was like, I think it was like grade 4, and this kid asked this really deep question, and it caused me to chuckle because it's like I had to think for a second, right? And it was something to do with something to do with scent and water or something, but it was some question that you could tell that he really had thought about. I answered it for him, but it's those neat moments that I like, because it makes you realize that, okay, some people have some deep thoughts going on here about that have taken that time, and this gets into the thing, I guess, Christian, about, your thoughts about the whole thing about Skinner. I know Skinner has been brought up by people. I've written a book about it, but just interested to know what your thoughts are about the science of dog training that way about Skinner. I know you had some insight.
Sure. Well, for starters, we don't know how humans tick. This has not been settled. Science has no clue what makes us do what we do, right? You have, Skinner's kind of in the middle. You have Piaget, who was also in this behavior movement. He kind of thought that children learned in stages, right? And then Skinner thought it's the reward and punishment, kind of the reinforcements is how one learns. And then I think it was Vygotsky or someone like that. They're the one that kind of got to, it's the social environment plus it's the social, connection plus the environment. And that's how children learn. Point being, I'm no expert, but I've read a ton of this stuff. Point being, from the way I discern, and kind of get through it, is that, ultimately there are no answers, that these people did experiments and have thesis. They have hypothesis and thesis, which should be challenged. That's part of the scientific process, is you challenge. And then not only do you challenge them, then you experiment in controlled environments, which is very little of how science is conducted anymore. Most of it is all data correlation, which in my view is not real science. It doesn't mean there's not a benefit in some regards, but there's, again, seeking truth, right? That you can't say that's true. It's not like mathematics, like that's true, undisputed, right? So
that's right.
I think it's a distraction in some ways, but I think it's just a crutch for, kind of like, first of all, the Brennans, which was a couple that were Skinner's pupils. They were some of the biggest animal dog trainers in Hollywood. So I think that's kind of how it kind of got into our culture, like these ideas of Skinner and the quadrants and all this kind of stuff. I think it kind of seeped in the past, and then just people kind of glammed onto it. which, you know, it's fine, but I just don't think it's very relevant. You know, I mean, again, it's on the response level, right? I mean, you have this guy Watson, who was kind of the founder of it all, who put his children through experiments, and they like killed themselves and become drug addicts. And I mean, it's just, you know, back to, we don't know. We don't know how the human mind works. How could we possibly know how the dog's mind works?
Well, the problem is, and this is the problem with going back to Pavlov, and I went into, when I wrote my book, you know, was they actually went to a level where they say, well, because we can't know, we're not even going to study the social aspect of that connection with dogs. So they wrote that off in a way that led to this problem, because then it was all just so superficial and appearance based that there's no depth at all. You know, it's like, I call it one dimensional. And so the whole dog training world, if you look at the problems, and that's the problem, you talk about science is supposed to actually be based on confronting the problems. You know, it's about challenging if there's issues, right? And so that's not happening, because this is not science. This has morphed into this thing with a type of belief system almost, where people's belief. So if you challenge them, that's why they get so offended. I'm like thinking, well, why are you getting so offended? Like if it's like, I'm putting out specific information, why are these people getting so triggered? Because you shouldn't be getting triggered if it's science, right? You should be like saying, okay, let's look at this. So just the fact that people get triggered over information I'm putting out shows you that this ain't science. You know, that you're
correct. And actually, in real life, Skinner proved what you're describing in real life is how Skinner behaved when Noam Chomsky rebutted his book. Skinner wouldn't even read the rebuttal. Wouldn't discuss. I mean, what kind of scientist is that? Well, that's not a scientist. That's an
science is controlled by the biased human. I mean, the point of everything, people can call something whatever they want, but it's not like a robot controlling it. Or, you know, this is controlled by humans that are flawed. And so agenda driven. So I don't care what anyone says. I mean, because you look at the reality of what's going on in the dog training world, and just because something's popular doesn't mean that it's true. I mean, you can find comfort in a lie. I mean, this is what's going on, is people have taken this to such a level that to walk this back, this is why in the dog training world, you know, you look at the problems, it's so massive. I don't think people really have an understanding of, like, when you kind of get a sense as to what I'm saying is going on here. I know you're dialed into that, and other people are getting dialed into that. I just
think they're a distraction. Ultimately, they're just a distraction. I mean, Watson. I mean, he had the where they did the kid and they scared him of a mouse, right? So they smacked something real loud, and then he would be scared of the noise associated with the mouse. Then he's scared of all furry animals, right? Skinner had his box, right? So you punish or you reward, but it doesn't seem like you have to think too deeply to kind of, as a human, to kind of think about that for a minute, and then well, that's kind of superficial, right? I love the word, to use your word. I mean, at the end of the day, man, I mean,
well, it's like this. When I
always have to do with its mind, how it's
I remember I was doing dog training for a group down in Good Samaritan Village here one day. There's a group of seniors, and one of them was a psychiatrist. She's a trained psychiatrist. And she was talking to me. She said, "Dale, your stuff is very, very insightful." And I was talking to her. Well, what about psychiatry? How's that working with the mind? She goes, "Well, basically, you know, you have to, once you get to a level of professional level, you have to choose which way you're going to go."
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's interesting how she kind of talked to me about that. Sure. You know, it's true because this gets into this whole thing about atheism. And I found it interesting that Mark DeVos is aligned with, he says, the Christian, aligned with a guy, Robert Hines, who's an anti-Christian, anti-God, and behavioralism is anti-God. I mean, I encourage Mark DeVos to do some research here, because we get this thing about the mind, and this gets into this whole debate about, even the moral argument, about right from wrong. You get into this whole thing. It kind of morphs into that side of things. But when you get into this thing about dogs, I show that there's depth. Dogs are not just robots. They connect with us at a deeper level, and so they are social. They're social animals.
Not horses. Right, they're not pigeons, they're not horses, they're not cows. They're unique. They're the first domesticized animal, a predator. How did that work out? Why did a predator become the first domesticized animal? 17,000 years before the goat. I mean, how did that work? How did that happen? Why? Why did we pick why did humans pick a predator? And why did that predator team up with us? I mean, to me, it just speaks towards there's a more complex relationship going on. I do agree with you that it's based on the social nature of dogs, and then we're all just trying to work it out. Work with these dogs, enjoy our lives with these dogs. I think that the dog training is a business, and they overcomplicate things a little bit. I was kind of going back with Miracle Canine this morning. Again, respectfully, I like their channel a lot. I respect that he had you on last.
Oh yeah, and like I said, I give David props. I mean, the thing is, like, a lot of people don't want that discussion, but and I was a little pushy in there because I fully expected to be shut down. But I mean, the thing is, he was respectful in the way that he brought me on. He allowed me to talk through everything, which I appreciate. And so, because my whole thing is, in order to come to arrive at what the truth is as to what's going on in the dog training world, you got to have that uncomfortable discussion. You got to have that discussion that allows for people to arrive at the truth. And what's happening in the dog training world, and this happened to Ivan Belanoff, that copyright situation, which I brought up through that discussion with Miracle Canine, because they showed the same video. Now, I got copyright strike through fair usage, but it just shows you that some trainers, they don't want to have that discussion, because it's going to interfere with what they're marketing, and
they want to make things overly complex, right? Yeah. So Miracle Canine today, they had this black kind of mixed breed, powerful breed dog, great dog, but in the parking lot, the dog's jumping on everybody and really reacting and everything. There's no influence by the humans. They're just standing there allowing it all. Then they go into his great facility, all these kennels around. The dog's allowed to express through the kennel on other dogs, just floating around the training area and all that. No influence from the humans at all. So I just said, hey, what's going on with no connection to the handler, the human? Well, this was just I find out through dialogue, this is just an assessment, right? Well, to me, the assessment was out in the parking lot when the dog's jumping all over the place. You really don't need a whole lot more than that. You don't need to see it barking other dogs or all this, but there's and then, 10 hours of assessing and this and that. And my point is, how complex you got. It's not this complicated, right? It's like these, it's just not,
No, the assessment is those core ingredients coming in right away, and the dog understanding the intent as to how you're interacting. So the assessment is short and sweet. The assessment is, people call me up and say, Dale, can I have an assessment? I'm like, no, we're actually going to do a training session because there's not much to assess. I'll tell you pretty quickly, and then the focus shifts to the person, right? So, but Miracle Canine, some of it is just like, and I guess the videos I put out for Miracle Canine before, that kind of triggered off, them wanting me to go on for this debate. But the videos, they're still there on my channel, on top of the stinking thinking. They really are great illustrations, because David, and this, I'm not saying this as a cheap shot or anything, but he actually tells the dog owner, hey, I don't care about where the dog is fixating or looking at. But then that really kind of illustrates the fact they're not dialed in that way. They're not focused. They're about mind and body, right? They're not focused on, the dog's state of mind as I talk about an express state, as control is manifesting, as the dog's expressing. They're not dialed in that way, just like any other balanced dog trainer, because if you watch the videos, typically they're standing there with the dog and they're waiting to start pushing the button on the remote collar, or they're talking, and the dog's head's pivoting and swiveling and investing, and they're not even dialed into that. I mean, it's
and that's that's just kind of what I noticed is it's just, it's just, if you're putting no influence over the dog, I mean, it's the dog's just doing whatever, and he, he responded that they'll be doing training and this and that. But the thing is about these higher drive dogs, these very reactive dogs, and really any dog, is they're working angles. So when you say training's not learning based, I totally agree. But that doesn't mean that dogs don't learn. That doesn't mean that
that's right.
They like and then they exploit it. and that's what I feel like he's doing. It's like, yeah, eventually the dog will kind of learn, it'll kind of work around you, it'll kind of figure out where it, how it can work its angle the best, and everything's fine until it's not, and it attacks another dog. Oh, what happened?
Yeah.
Right? And this is kind of what you talk about. It's like, out of the blue, everything was fine, right?
Yeah.
Everything's fine. No, the dog's working around you.
Well, yeah, and that's why I say, like, control gives comfort. Control offers up a false image of change. So that's the thing that trainers aren't dialed into. They're walking into a situation, and it doesn't follow the path of an intervention. They're not interacting in the way in which it's going to reveal the current state of the relationship. They're walking in, like, expressing emotion with the dog, and then the bad things start happening. The dog can be floating around for doing a sit or a down, and that can look great at an appearance level. Meanwhile, change isn't happening. The dog's holding control throughout the entire process. So these trainers are not dialed in that way. So when I talk about certain concepts, of course they talk about, the big word they use is that, it's like a word salad, right? They try to write off what I'm saying because, and then the point I may have put a couple of videos, I was saying they have all the time in the world to invest in this corrupt ideology, right? They spend thousands of dollars because people are telling them what they want to hear, right, based on their emotional connection with dogs. Well, so it's really a shim sham type of thing that's going on here.
They're missing the definition of word salad. You're consistent. I mean, it's just a simple salad. It's only got a couple ingredients. Sorry. I would argue that they have the word. Mark for sure is word salad king.
And speaking of, and on that note, let me bring up a video. Let's get into this debate. I didn't really talk about too much yet but let's get your thoughts on some of this stuff going on here. I want to share the video here.
Yeah, great. I mean, that was a great discussion, Kevin.
Yeah, so
really, that couldn't have been an easy chair to sit in doing that interview and going through that, and he really held it together.
Yeah, so let me just show. Can you see this on the screen here?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to play. I'm just gonna play a minute of this just so people know like what we're talking about. So we're talking about the anti-dog trainer Kevin, I believe his first name is.
Yeah.
And Mark DeBose. So some backstory here. There was Mark DeBose put out lots of videos here talking about within his like permissive approach. I've done a lot of videos on it, and the anti-dog trainer stepped forward here and said, let's have a debate about, and understand Mark DeBose, he's aligned with Robert Hines. We'll talk about that in a minute here too, but let me play this one for over 3 hours, but I just want to play a minute of this, just this back and forth so people
pop up over here. That's not what happens because I have a holistic approach to this.
So this is I'm going to say straight up in the easiest way I can right now, the difference between what you just said there and what it is that and even what Robert talks about. You're saying that people stick with you and stick with you and stick with you and stick with you. That means that there must be new issues that keep popping up over and over and over that you need to keep on addressing.
Mark,
you said that yourself in this own video right now.
Listen, okay, let me break this down. Me and my brain not understanding you. Let me break this down to a kindergarten level. They describe the problem they're having. I explain to them what I think's going on. We set up a session. I go to that session. I assess the dog. I assess what's happening. What is the dynamic between the dog and the family? And then I figure out what is the strategy moving forward.
Yeah.
Stop it there at the commercial part here. Yeah. So that just gives you. So what's your thoughts on that the back and forth between?
I mean, I enjoyed it. I mean, it's hard to have an opinion on Mark. First of all, I think Mark's I like his channel. He has good energy. Like he's got a good YouTube thing going on and he's a character and I appreciate that. And I'm rooting for him to come over to the light, leave the dark side and come over to the light here. And I know I hope that he's thinking it through better, but I think that Mark's, in some ways, like I feel like he's still searching. I mean, he's trying to make excuses, or I was trolling him a little bit, saying making up as you.
We're gonna segue here on that note because I want to show another video. Speaking of, of his journey, and which I find this video is very interesting. Let me see here. Yes, let's bring this one up. Now, I don't know if you've seen this. This is Mark DeBose at the Dog Daddy seminar. So let's just play a brief clip of this, because this really is what I'm going to be, if Mark DeBose and I have a conversation, we'll be talking about this stuff. So
Came out here to see why the Dog Daddy out here is blowing up and going crazy on the YouTube and on all social media. So I think I came to find out the reason, because he's a real dog trainer, and people are in the need of real dog trainers today. And he's something that's going to be able to provide you with some real good understanding of how to be able to communicate effectively with your dog. I just want to see it in person, because videos and everything is kind of just, you don't really know. But when you see it in person, you know it's real in person. And that's why I say this is what I call real dog training.
So let me stop. So I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I know. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, he's really gone to the complete other polar opposite of, this versus Robert. I mean, the Dog Daddy versus Robert. I mean, you can't get any further apart.
Well, yeah. Have you seen that clip before?
I have not seen that clip. No.
Okay, so this is new.
And it doesn't surprise me, though. That's kind of was my point. I feel like he's kind of searching still. And for him to speak well about the Dog Daddy, I think is fine, because I think, and you and I've talked about it, because I asked you about the Dog Daddy. I mean, I think the Dog Daddy, in terms of the power play.
Yeah, that's right.
Being he's in the right position with the dog in terms of a power play.
That's right.
I just sloppy, right? Because you're really manhandling the dog. And again, it reminds me of kind of the way I thought you approached dogs in the past with my dogs in the past. That's more like something I would have felt, oh, this is how you do it.
Well, that gets into the actual like I talk about, and right now, in fact, I'm doing an extensive breakdown series on my member area between, Larry Crone and Ivan Belknap. And interesting, because this is very similar with this the DeBose situation with the Dog Daddy, because the starting point of some of these trainers is that he's like Larry Crone said, he encountered some remote collar trainers early on in his career. The dogs were like screaming. The dogs were having a very high reaction to those devices, and it caused him to kind of question. And then he ended up on the side of being a balanced trainer. And DeBose is the same way. DeBose is like, because in the comment section, in fact, the anti-dog trainer questioned about that, okay, how did you go to the Dog Daddy and end up with Robert Hines, but like, why? Like, that's interesting. And it was the same type of scenario. Is like, because you could tie that into there's a video that Mark DeBose put out about encountering a dog that was a very, like, the 1 percentile dog, and he bottomed out. Like, he got to a place where he couldn't get through it, and he bottomed out. And so instead of, again, this is the point I'm going to make, if I talk to DeBose, like, why wouldn't you, instead of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater and saying, okay, I'm just gonna not even audit properly, say, okay, what is the role of influence and control? Is it about a specific method? Say, I talk about a intentional interaction-based method that speaks the right language, right? Because it is about making sense to the dog. It's about those core ingredients have to be reconciled the right way. Otherwise, yeah, you could have reactions like that with dogs, like going into high stress and then you're not going to be able to work through that. And then it's going to cause you to doubt yourself, the question, and to end up on the other side. And all people, someone like Robert Hines, it's incredible to me. Okay, now you went from the Dog Daddy, now you're with Robert Hines. Like, what the heck happened? You know what I'm saying? It's just really, And then here's the other thing that gets me too, Christian, that, and this is the part of the unethical thing I don't like about these individuals, is that then when you have a conversation with them, while he's talking to the anti-dog trainer, they come off in a way where they're trying to misrepresent certain aspects of the dog and human dynamic. They like Robert Hines will do that too. He'll start using the word violence.
Choking
the dogs. He'll use certain rhetoric and inflammatory language, which is really misrepresents what's going on, because he's trying to incite, just like Zach George does. He's trying to incite a certain reaction from people, because he doesn't want to have that conversation where you can break it down, right? Because that's not where you guys are coming from. And Mark DeBose is doing the same thing. If you pay attention to how he's talking about certain things like control. So, well, because of that, you must be a controlling person. He's trying to label
Right.
certain ways,
Yeah.
you know, and I find being very dishonest about, you know,
Yeah.
so even
I
if I
thought
was
that
to
was
say,
Yeah.
even if I was to say that he started off with a dog daddy and maybe that caused the question, I would still have to question, okay, what are you doing now though? You know what I'm saying? It's like now
Yes,
you're taking it to the street
right.
here and not being honest about certain things. That's the thing that kind of rubs me the wrong way with some of these characters. If that
Well, and
makes
there's
sense.
no method, there's no system.
Yeah.
I mean, even if I don't agree with balanced dog trainers, if you ask Miracle Canine what their system is, they would lay it out for you. They would tell you,
Sure.
first we assess, then we do this, then we do that,
Mhm.
I might not agree with any of it. But with Mark, it's like, well, okay, on an intellectual level, I can't grasp what he's saying, and then I can't see it. I mean, I don't fault him for that. It's his YouTube channel. I think he should stick with entertainment and not be getting into all this stuff personally until he figures it all out himself, you know?
Or stick
So,
to, because he's talking about his, you know, personal journey as a human.
yeah,
That's
right,
fine
exactly.
that's fine for people, but my point of all is that, like, once you bring dogs into it, and see, this is where I'm like, once you bring dogs into it and you're advocating your permissive approach as a process, that's where I have the problem. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Because
well, people listen to it.
then people are taking that and
Yeah.
they're ending up in the same place someone like Zach George, and DeBose doesn't want to admit that. Like, he's like saying, well, I can be me, I can say whatever the heck I want to say. You can, but if you're putting out as a dog trainer, you're putting that out on social media, then you're going to get my attention a little bit. And then if you start, and here's the other thing that people don't realize, and I talk about, then if you're in the background mouthing off saying Dale McCluskey destroys dogs, then you're really going to get my attention, right? Because it's like, okay, then what do you expect? I'm gonna hover on you a little bit because you're not actually being honest about, you're being like, you're cheap shotting. You're saying things to people, and I'm not going to mention names here who I got this from, but I know he personally made a statement behind the scenes before this even really got rolling. And so I'm not doing this to get back at him, but I'm just saying, hold on here a second. This guy's got a mouth on him, and he's got a lot to say. Well, then
Yeah,
back
it's
it up.
unprofessional.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very
unprofessional.
unprofessional. Yeah.
You know?
So,
But
you know, and that's where I
that's
get kind of like saying, okay, I've had enough of this foolishness, not just with him, but
Yeah.
in general. Say, okay, I'm going to put it
Yeah,
out
no.
there, and because again, what I say, Christian, is like these trainers are not even qualifying, establishing the criteria in which they're saying that perception of dogs are changing based on superficially motivating these dogs and what
Right.
they're doing. Because the question is, what's the criteria they're using to establish that the perception of dogs are changing? Well, there is none. Okay, it's all assumption. It's flawed. It's all assumption based. And this is why I talk about the only way to do that is those two core ingredients coming in, influence and control. That's what reveals and changes. But these trainers are getting away with working the system this way and really misrepresenting. This is why even using that word behavior, all these trainers do it. They bring that word behavior within this super framework or superficial response.
Yeah.
That word behavior doesn't even belong. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
there's so much wrong here with what's going on in the dog training world.
Right, and but I saw it too with Mark, how he was saying to Kevin, like, well, you're a real, your energy, you're a real intense kind of, real
Yeah.
strong energy kind of person, and this kind of stuff. And Caesar Milan would enter into some of that stuff, and I don't deny that that's a factor, but that's superficial in itself, in a way. I mean, I think the energy matters, but I mean, it's the same as when people are reading their dog. I think the dog feels this. The dog's afraid. Like, how do you know the dog's afraid? I mean, I'm not saying you can't pick up on little tells with body language, right?
Well,
but this
they're not able. Yeah,
on
they're not
energy,
able to. They're not.
all that
Yeah, it's a joke. They're not reconcile the responses to the relationship properly. You know what I'm saying? It's out of context. And so, and the thing I don't, the thing about Mark and other trainers like him, when I talk about a process, I'm talking about a point in the relationship where the process is defined in such a way based on the current state of the relationship, where those
Right.
two core ingredients are coming in a certain way, right? So it's going to come off a certain way. It's going to come off looking kind of tyrannical. But see, what they try to do here is they don't want to have that discussion. They just say, oh, Dale's a control freak. And that's the thing
Right.
that's dishonest here, is that when you're catching a lot of my training and when people look at my videos, I'm dealing with the worst part of the relationship at that point. You know what I'm saying? It's like a moment in time. It's not meant to be like forever. you know, it's like a moment in time. It may have to continue on for a while, depending on if you're dealing with a 1 percentile dog. But example is, I just got a new dog. I got Dolly, you know, rescue Dolly
That's
from
why I'm
me.
smiling, because I'm like, he just got Dolly.
I got Dolly. Now here's the thing. And Dolly, okay, Dolly's my wife's dog. Dolly's a pet. Okay, so yes, right now we're doing some, like, there's some control and there's some influence happening. We got the structure. Dolly's doing fantastic. Dolly is like part Malinois, so you can imagine, right? That
I was going to say, she looked like a little mini Dale police dog. I mean, those ears, I was like, Dale looked like a little mini police dog.
Little mini, exactly, right? I'll have to do some optics so make her look bigger than she is, right? Or, you know, like some special effects, right? Like a dinosaur looking like, you know.
But that breed of dog, you know, those little Chihuahua mix, I mean, that's a high drive dog right there, potentially. I mean, that's a dog that has drive. Those dogs are, they're one of the top 3 surrendered dogs is a Chihuahua. Everyone thinks it's just
it is, because they're small and people want to baby them. But here's the point too, is my wife, like when I was talking to her about, and she's doing all the work, you know, like she's doing all the stuff, right? And I joke with her, I said, that's her dog. But see, that's the thing. People look at the situation, say, no, I can have, you know, I have pets, okay? I've had dogs, and the freedom happens, and they're a dog. They have the little doggy bed, the crate will fade away, and even the method will reduce down. But, you know, my wife will say, she said, Dale, she goes, because I joke with her, I said, man, you're doing a great job with Dolly. You have to be my assistant dog trainer. She said, no, she said, because deep down, I want to put all these dogs in baby carriages, right? So she's like, admits that, you know, so, but that shows you that's just being real, right? Saying, you know, but it's showing you that, you know, it's like people that just come onto my thing, they assume certain things, they don't want to know because it gets in the way of their agenda. Like to actually admit certain things, to say, okay, so it kills me how these that's why it kind of rubs me the wrong way with a lot of these individuals, because if I was to meet them in person, you know, and have a discussion, I would say to them, I said, what's wrong with you? Like really? Like you're really gonna come off and say, I mean, that's like social media to me.
Yeah,
so
well, that's the internet. It allows us all to be mean to each other.
Yeah.
Like real easy. It makes it really easy to be mean to each other. You know,
no, you're right.
You know,
you're right.
It's, you know, but the other thing with the internet and the method is that the method, it's about slowing things down often, right? So if you're constantly slowing things down, again, that is not probably the best presentation for the internet, you know? You know, because that's the other thing that impressed me about the method is that, you know, you're really slowing things down so that the dog is really, hopefully the dog is really getting it, making that connection, understanding your intent. Because again, on the internet, you watch people working with dogs and everything's real quick, real bam, bam, bam. And that just hasn't been my experience, certainly not with the method. You know, it's but the results are incredible. I mean, you just have to.
You have to, it's like, I think that's the thing. That's the thing about finding the system is like, usually it's the people with the 1 percentile dogs that will find me. But hopefully, as things move forward, like with yourself, and there's people out there, that more people will. But get back to let's go and look at one more. This is the funny. This is gonna be a funny one here, because this is this is a guy that just popped up out of nowhere, it seemed. And so I want to show this. Now this guy just came from called the Canine Behavior Society, and this guy just popped up out of nowhere. So I just want to show just a part of this. I don't know if you've seen this guy yet, but anyway, let me play a portion.
And it's wrong, and I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say something about it. We're not going to continue to allow this to happen. So, and this is what Dan told me to say. He's still in the bathroom. He's still in the bathroom. I'm going to go check on him real quick.
Well, this guy,
Top Gear Canine and Dale McCluskey have been meeting behind. This is the problem going on with the dog training world. They've been meeting behind everybody's back, going to the internet cafe, not for coffee, for tea. Okay.
So this guy just appeared out of seemed like nowhere. And he he had a debate. I didn't even realize this because there's so much going on in the dog training world. It's hard to even keep track of everything. But this guy had a debate with Robert Hines originally.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
the funny story of this is when Mark DeBose and Kevin, the anti-dog trainer guy, were having their 3-hour debate. I did jump on for like, I think a half an hour, but I had a lot going on that like my new dog showed up, Dolly, and I have Cooper here too. And so I'll be honest with everyone, I didn't watch the entire 3 hours, but I jumped on for like a half an hour when I was sitting out here. And then I start typing some comments, right? And people get all triggered off. Like this is what happened to this guy here from the Canine Society. He got all upset because it's like I did some typing there about things about DeBose or whatever. It wasn't personal, just like typing up some stuff. And this guy lost his mind. And then he started pumping out some videos here. And now he's dressed. He's doing this parody where he's like calls himself Dan, the assistant guy, and he's like going on about tagging me and tagging.
Well, it's pretty obvious what's motivating him, right? I mean, all these skinnier guys like to talk about motivators. Well, it's like, what's motivating him? Obviously, clicks. I mean, that's 100% clickbait.
I'll show you what this guy reminds me of here, and I'm going to bring up this video. You haven't seen this, but this is, I don't know if you heard of the Trailer Park Boys in Canada.
Yeah, I have.
Okay, well, Conky, the episode. Well, I'll just play a part. This Conky right here. This reminds me of this guy. Just watch this. This is Bubbles' puppet that he got out of the swamp.
Oh my God, Conky, where have you been? Oh my God, oh my God, I've missed you. I thought you were dead for sure.
I thought you were dead too, you little bastard.
Luckily, I don't need oxygen to live underwater like you do. Stupid.
So there's my, like, that's the first thing. When this guy showed up with that towel over his coat over his head, I'm thinking that's Conky from the Trailer Park Boys. Like, this is getting so ridiculous, Christian. I don't even know what to say.
Well, I think that's the perfect response, Dale.
This guy appeared out of the swamp or something. I don't know where this guy come from, like Conky. But anyway, it's just crazy. The dog training world's gotten out of control.
Well, I hope he, comes around. I actually caught a little bit of him and Robert, and when they spoke, and again, it was really very challenging to get through. I didn't watch the whole thing. It was like 3.5 hours, but it was kind of like you can't make sense of the discussion. Like they're just talking in circles. Again, back to the word salad thing. It's like, oh my God, these guys. I mean, there's no start or finish to any of it. It's like this circle talk.
I think that's what it comes down to, why people get so upset at someone like me, because I'm very specific when I say training's not a learning-based exercise. And when I talk about, it taking the path of a intervention, interaction-based, that starts to that defines it. You know what I'm saying? That's what causes a problem, because even when I talked to a balanced dog trainer years ago, it's a guy that's on the, he wanted to have a consult with me. Now, I'm not going to release his consults like Robert Hines did with, ethically and morally. I would never, ever do that, regardless of what people say about me after the fact. That those are private. They should be private. But here's the point is, when I got to the point in the discussion with this balanced dog trainer where I started to lay it out that way, I say, okay, here's what a process is. He got upset. He didn't like it. Because here's my point. If you say the truth is subjective and there's more than one way to train a dog, that means you can do whatever the hell you want to do. You know what I'm saying? Right. It can be whatever you want. But when you start to say, well, no, there is truth, which there is, it doesn't make sense that there isn't truth, or there isn't a process. There is. Well, that's what gets people upset, because this is what's been going on. Like this whole thing with, and then the collateral damage from this, with all the dogs being destroyed and medicated. Well, there you have it. So people, like someone should have thought, someone would have had to think at some point, Kristen, that someone's going to step up sooner or later and put it out there or figure this out. You know what I'm saying? Like, it didn't have to be me. But, and this is where these trainers are so arrogant and prideful and cocky. They'll say, oh, Dale's the only one that, knows what the truth, whatever. See, and that's the arrogance of it all. I'm saying, well, no, that's somehow, I'm saying you can package up any way you want.
And the truth is there with or without Dale. You're just conveying the message.
I'm just a
Right.
messenger.
Right?
Yeah, I
And-
mean,
and
yeah.
the whole thing about the learning base, I think that also triggers people because, like I said earlier, that doesn't mean Dale's saying that dogs don't learn. What
Yeah,
it
that's right.
means is that there's a time when you can use motivators to teach the dog. I like to use the word tricks. That also triggers
Sure.
people
Yeah,
because they want to make it into more than just a trick, right? But
yeah.
ultimately, once the relationship's in place, these are like tricks. They're like little tricks you're
Well,
teaching the dog. Like,
well, I
shake,
tell
go
people
get
that,
that, bring it back.
yeah,
I mean,
but when I say the relationship's the motivator, right?
Right.
There's the thing that really, blows it out of the water because, you're not superficially motivating dogs that way, especially in the middle of a relationship problem. So you're right, but to get a sense of where does motivating a response fit, if you
Right,
watch my service dog training process, right, with that whole
Right.
4-month process, you'll see how that all lines up. You'll see,
right,
at the first part of it, right, you're fixing the relationship, you're generating the right focus. It's more interaction based. Then you get to once the focus or the perception of the dogs have changed at a certain level, then we can start to do like the fun stuff or whatever you want to call it, right? We
Yeah.
start to motivate the responses. So,
Motivate the
but
dog.
people, the problem is, Christian, when people go onto my website or go onto my videos, they get so triggered so fast because they're looking through a certain lens. They don't even take the time to watch,
Yeah.
anything because they just don't. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
they're not going in there for that reason to really investigate or audit. They're going in there just with a already preconceived idea, and that's the problem.
That is
I
the
tell
problem.
people, I say all the time, shouldn't as a looking at the current state of the dog training world, shouldn't the default be the mess and asking
Yeah.
the questions even before encountering me? Shouldn't it be like, okay, I want to figure ethically and morally, I want to figure out what the real problem is here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's the thing that kind of rubs me too, because it's saying these trainers come in, they have lots of, but shouldn't your starting point be the fact that dog training world is completely a train wreck? Like, shouldn't that be
Absolutely.
your act?
And I
Why
would
is
guess
it that being?
I would guess that most people that myself, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, and I would guess that most people, like when they start to have a problem with their dog, a lot of us go to the internet, right? We go to YouTube, go to forums to get information, right?
Yeah.
So, this idea that there might be great trainers out there that can use motivators and teach dogs all kinds of things, like you're helping me with tracking work for Hildegard, because we're at a level now where we can start to move into using motivators, right? So it's just, and so I'm sure there's trainers out there. I think of that top 9 canine guy, Christoph. Great, he could be great at teaching a dog how to jump over a wall or bite an arm or all that. I'm not suggesting that he doesn't have some good experience and kind of understand how to motivate a dog to do behaviors, tricks, stunts, whatever you want to call it. But that's not the point of your channel. That's not your message. Your message is to help most regular dog owners understand the significance of their relationship with their dog. That's paramount. All this other stuff is for later. If you want to, learn all these other ways to motivate a dog and train a dog, and be a police dog, a tracking dog. That's later.
That's the thing. If your relationship with your dog is fantastic, if the dog's seeing you the right way, then have at it. I mean, you can have all sorts of do whatever you want. But the point of what I'm doing as a trainer is it's at the point of that relationship where things are sideways. Like that's the thing. You're seeking help because you're having a relationship problem. See, that's the thing. That's the intervention part of it. And so, but the problem here is the majority of trainers, they're not seeing it that way at all. So they're bringing, food they're motivating dogs that way. They're seeing the whole entire thing as a learning-based exercise that way. See, there's the problem. That's their actual starting point. And so that's a problem because, they're not, so people could be failing all around them. They could have a 30 or 40 or 50% fail rate and not even know that people are failing because they're focused on responses in a superficial way. That's their whole criteria. That's what they're looking at.
And then the dogs work around everything, and then the owners are just managing their dog problems for their whole life, right? Because the dogs figure little workarounds, and the owners say, oh, well, I can kind of live with that, so I'm fine with that. And all these little workarounds develop, and then lots of people hopefully get by and never have a problem, but some people are going to experience a problem. That all those workarounds were just that. They were just workarounds. Nothing changed. You know, the dog isn't viewing the person correctly, the owner. So yeah, to me, I think that, you know, there's lots of cool stuff to work with your dog on out there. Lots of cool channels, and that's partly why shame on Zach George, because he's like Mr. Frisbee dog guy. Well, then stick with Frisbees and dogs. Fine. Right. But he wanted to then delve into something, a deeper topic, which is how you bond with your dog, right? How you communicate with your dog, right? The relationship you have, the amount of, you know, empathy and the amount of affection you put on the dog. Like, he wants to get into all these really deep topics, but then he doesn't create a forum to discuss any of those topics.
Well, because they're not dialed into the relationship that way. It's all just superficial anyway. So they're not even identifying what a relationship problem even represents. They're not tying in behavior issues that way, right? So he's the same thing. He don't, you know, to him it's all just about, you know, this is just a learning-based exercise. They're not connecting dots. All these trainers, whether Zach George or even balanced dog trainers for the most part, that's just their default setting. That's their default jumping in point. This is how you,
right. It's somehow like the dog can sense Zach's virtue, and the dog senses Zach's virtue, and they bond over that common virtue that they have for each other. I mean, it's just nonsense. I mean, it's so silly. I mean, what else is it? What is Zach doing to connect with the dog? I mean, he's baby talking to dogs. He's you know, showing empathy. They're scared. They're just scared.
And it leads to a bad connection because that, you know, that attachment, that possessiveness is a problem. That's why the service dog training industry is a mess. So people aren't putting things into context because, again, their whole basis for what represents a process is not what it should be. You know what I'm saying? It's not based on relationship that way. They're not dialed in that way. So, you know, it sets that counterfeit picture in motion and that type of possessive attachment issue happening. And then before you know it, people are wondering, and then they blame the dog. Well, there's got to be something wrong with the dog. And see, this just cycles around that way. It's like an endless loop that people are trapped in from these trainers. Meanwhile, they're making money off of it because it's so easy to do. It's so easy to pander that way.
Oh, it's so easy to make excuses like, oh, well, what do you know about, I love this when they say, what do you know about your dog, like when it was a puppy? Oh, well, we didn't get the dog till it was 10 months old. Oh, it was probably abused. And it was probably this and probably that and blah, blah, blah. And it's to me, it's become so obvious that this is like a shtick. It's like a racket, right? Because, I mean, how could they possibly discern how the dog feels? I mean, about its past. I mean, how do you figure that all out? I mean, you know, they can't speak. I mean, it goes back to Skinner. Like the dog, like humans can't learn how to speak. The argument is there a way to communicate, and it's deeper within us? The science can't figure it out. Why we can do language and how we can communicate like this. So the idea that Zach George can communicate with another species through his mind is pretty amazing. You know, that's why I like that you say it's interaction based. You don't just stand there like Yoda with your arms behind your back.
No, it's intent. The dogs understand specific language. The dogs understand the intent based on how you're moving, how, you know, influence and control are reconciled through those interactions and release. So there is depth. I mean, there's as you know, there's a lot to it, but it is what it is. So kind of finishing off here, I guess, gonna wrap it up a little bit here, I guess, Christian. I appreciate you coming on. So people, I guess, to go back, so if people want to find you, I guess, or what's your next step here, or what's your plan here, so people can kind of
you know, part of me is my timeline for a business is kind of you know, kind of tracking Hildegard's progress, right? It was important to me personally to experience turning around the perception of a dog, a high drive dog, a 1% dog, to really accomplish that, right? before I kind of put myself out there to help others, I figured I better make sure I have my own house in order and kind of understand what I'm telling others to do, right? So she's coming along so well. You've been gracious enough to start a tracking program with me. So that's very exciting for me. So I'm very focused on that right now, you know, interacting with her in a way to build that bridge so we can start doing tracking work. But, you know, I'm going to initially launch in Bradenton, Florida at the farmer's market. And I will initially have a place where people can walk up and talk with me, you know, a farmer's market, buy stuff, you know, buy food and whatever else we decide to kind of merchandise. But part of why I'm starting at the market is I like the opportunity, lots of dogs at a lot of these markets, these outside markets, right? So I like the opportunity, almost like you know, like the carnival or something, standing off to the side and kind of barking at people, no pun intended, to kind of come over with their dog. You know, this idea, hey, do you have a problem with you and your dog's relationship? Question mark. You know, kind of, why don't you come over here and let's talk about it, and kind of see where that goes. You know, that's vicariously a little bit of anthropology, kind of liking this idea of a bit of an experiment, you know, to kind of see how receptive people are going to be to this forum, mostly a discussion. You know, part of that's when I talk about the methods with others, and I've worked with a few people, not for pay, but just if they're having issues and they want to have a discussion, but it ends up being like an hour and 15 minutes of talking with the human and like 10 minutes or 5 minutes with the dog, you know? So I think this is probably going to be fine for the farmer's market because it's really not about them handing the dog over to me like the dog daddy. And then I power play the crap out of the dog in front of them and then hand it back. You know, it's really more about the method, right? Kind of quickly, because you can show a good version of the method, kind of a cliff notes pretty quickly, right? Of the actual physical kinetic part of the method. But it's really more about like discussing, kind of, you know, and that's where the food comes in. My little spiel about, well, you see how you're kind of babying the dog, and that's great, but consider this form of affection, right? This nurturing form of affection versus this over-the-top, emotional, kind of weakness form of affection. Right. So that's kind of it. It's kind of just you know, sell stuff, you know, develop a clientele, but a lot of it's the messaging. I mean, I'm like anyone else. We all need to make money. So I'd like to have a business that can sustain itself. But I'm fortunate enough where a big part of my focus is on, you know, working the method. I want to be able to work dogs. I want to help people and their dogs because it is frustrating for me. Once you're exposed to the method and you see how a calm dog is. People like on farms and stuff that grow up with dogs in a healthy environment probably already know this, like the way a dog should behave, like they just get it, you know? But for a lot of us that grow up in these urban environments and stuff and all these people walking around and they have no clue what kind of temperament their dog has. They're all treating their dog the exact same way. And some people are getting away with it, others aren't. So a lot of chaos and confusion out there. So like yourself, I'd like to be able to just do my part to kind of put out these ideas, you know, about how to communicate and build a good relationship with your dog, you know?
So is there a day coming up for the farmer's market? You mentioned farmer's market, but is there a date?
They'll be in Florida, as you know, they'll be winding it down soon, you know, as soon as the summer hits. So I'll engage in it for next season. But in the meantime, you know, I'll be building a website, and that's pretty much how I'll interact with people. I mean, the model that I'm working on has more to do with kind of the subscription model where there's different types of subscriptions. One of them being just like the farmer's dog or any of these other subscription food services where the food just shows up when it's supposed to at your doorstep. And then other versions of the service will be more like I mentioned earlier, where, you know, I will go into the home, similar to when you take on a client or any trainer. The difference is that the approach is going to come from the food and putting together the food for the family and the dog, you know, the food plan. And then through that food plan, it's to kind of show how that actually lines up really well. That idea of nurturing versus emotion lines up really well with this method I can show you to kind of start to get your dog to perceive you the right way. And that's how it's, because you and I, you know, through my class with you, I was able to work with strangers, families, your clients, new clients.
Yeah.
And it was very eye-opening, you know, because I could only imagine the emotional connection people could have to their dogs. Because
Well,
I
I think
feel
you
like when I saw it, I mean, I was like, whoa, people are like young people like crying over having to
Oh, you saw, yeah.
be firm with the dog. Again, not even no leash technique, nothing. Just talking about the idea of being a leader, firm, kind of controlling it, which
the one situation with the young lady, she like almost like PTSD. And so that was, but you got to see that during the course, because during the course, that the 1 week course, while you're here, I actually took you out to do hands-on with actual, you know, with the method with new people. So you got to experience that type of exposure, which I think was helpful and interesting at the same time.
Oh, it had a big impact on me. It kind of made me aware of that early on and starting this kind of work, to be aware of that, you know, that it's, this is different than a lot, as much as I say it's similar to the cooking and all this, but it is different. The connection people have to their dogs can be very unhealthy. And I'm not saying they're going to have a terrible life and mental health problems, but it's definitely not good for the dog, right?
Well, and they have that support too, because even here, like Cooper's back, and this is one of the things that got me with, Mark DeBose went on my thing was questioning, well, why is Cooper back with a refresher? Listen, this is about relationship. I mean, you know, what happens is it's about people. So even though you get a dog up to a really high level in a good way at first, you know, with Cooper, a couple of years go by, and if you just let the structure go and, you know, start to emotionalize the dog, things are going to reverse a little bit. Yeah, things are reverse a little bit, but that's part of what I do in terms of I walk alongside people for the entire relationship of the dog, the lifetime of the dog. So, you know, this is something that can happen, but even when you're doing what I call refresher, it's usually not, because once you get to that level with the dog, that's there. And the refresher is like, I call smoothing off the rough edges. So even Cooper here has improved greatly towards a certain reactivity issue. So, you know, but that's what it's about. It's about walking alongside people in the relationship because you're invested with them. And so it's not just like, even though I do it as an intervention, you know, I'm there to support people for the long haul. And not that, you know, you want, because some people, when they come to me, it's like, it could be one session, it could be 2 sessions. That's why it's like you're meeting people in, you know, it's an intervention. So you're meeting people in terms of their current state of relationship. So once you get them thinking the right way, connecting the right way, they're good to go. I mean, or it could be, you know, it may take longer, but every situation is different. But the point of it is to say you're going into it the right way. And it's about, you know, encouraging people. Because here's the thing, when I go on social media, it comes off pretty negative in a certain way, because you're dealing with a culture, you're coming up against that corrupt type of idea of things. And of course, sparks are going to fly. But when I'm helping people, Christian, as you know, it's a positive experience. When people find me, you know, because you were here that week when I was going out helping people, it may be challenging, but it's like you meet people with grace, right? You meet people to say, hey, I understand where you're at. Let's, you know, so it's a different type of thing. I'm not, you know, I don't come off abrasive to people at all, because, you know, they're there for help. And so, you know, but social media is a different type of kettle of fish, because, you know, you're encountering these people who are, like I said, saying things that they normally wouldn't say in person, but you're coming up against that really corrupt thing, and it's hard because it's like it's a culture. So, but so, but to mention too is I'm putting on again the course coming up. Announces April the 28th coming up, and like I put the offer out, like people who have already attended the course, Christian, they're more like with Christian, he's more than welcome to come back and revisit during the future courses. So it's how I do courses too. It's like an offer, because it's like that support mechanisms there, because, you know, the course itself is like, it's like a starting point. But as you develop as a trainer, as you know, it takes time. You're still on that journey. And so it's going to take months and even years as you go through it. But, you know, I come alongside people. So it's like giving people that support. And that's where too, you announce like what your plans are for the future, just so anyone's interested. I'm going to be putting Christian's profile on the Dog Trainer Association page, the Association of Relational Dog Trainers. So here shortly in the coming week or so, you're going to see Christian's profile on there. You're going to see as he builds on his new website, that the links will be there. So so just stay tuned for that. So as Christian gets rolling here, and for anyone who's interested in what he's doing down in Bradenton, Florida, I encourage you to check that out. Christian's a great guy. You know, he's a lot more patient than I am on social media for sure. I'll admit that. So, but you know, you'll see him on there. You know, that's the thing. He's interested, he's engaging. You're right. He's giving people some solid tips and advice and insight. So that's part of the journey as well. So, so Christian, I really appreciate you coming on and providing your perspective and insight and lots of good stuff. And we'll definitely have you on again here shortly. And yeah, anything you want to say here as we wrap up?
No, I'm just excited to be a part of your message, Dale, and I have a lot of respect for what you've developed. And I must say, if anyone meets Dale in person, he's very genuine, and you know, like he was a police officer, so he has a little bit of police energy, if you will. You know, like Kevin was getting blamed for being too, you know, too hardcore or whatever Mark was saying, but you know, but deep down, Dale, I can tell you're you know, real caring person, and when people, it really does bug me when people are like, Dale's choking dogs out. I mean, it really frustrates me because it's so derogatory and so untrue. It's just crazy. But what can you do? You know,
Well, we just
keep
fight, Dale. Keep fighting the good fight, and moving forward, and giving people the right information, and that's what it's about. Just like how you found me and other people, but we just keep putting the message out there and go from there. So, anyway, Chris, I appreciate you coming on, and we will talk.
Thanks, guys. Have a great
really
day,
soon.
Dale.
Okay, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Okay.